Dianne and I have a lot to cover today, so we're just kind of gonna jump straight into it. But I cannot stress this enough. Please share, because we're going to cover this as well. We have to hear from Black women in yoga and wellness. And those are the voices, to me specifically, that we have to be amplifying. And I cannot say this enough, and I will continue to say this.
I appreciate it.
And I've always been saying this, but I'm going to continue to say this even more. So please like, please share. And Dianne, you know, you and I, we can just go, I mean, we're going to drop, I know you're going to drop so much truth and wisdom today, and I can't wait. I'm almost giddy with excitement. But what I would love to do actually, as we begin today, is for you to just introduce yourself. And let me just give a little bit of a precursor. Yeah. I've been a huge fan of Dianne's for a long time. She also works, I'm now working with Yoga International. You're working with Yoga International. We have our dear sister and colleague, Janessa Mondestine, who's doing the work, who's walking the walk, who's talking the talk. Yoga International as well. But to me, what I have admired so much about you, Dianne, is that A, of course, you're a Black woman in yoga and wellness, but you were doing this, A, before it was trendy, and B, especially with your yoga for all, yoga for all sizes and shapes. And you've been doing this work for over 20 years.
Yes. Yes, I have.
And again, before it became a hashtag or a trending topic, or before it was working in your favor to do this work.
And I got a lot of pushback. I can
imagine. So can you just share with us all about your journey?
Into yoga?
Yes.
Yeah, I had this home. The book is on my shelf behind me, but it's not relevant because the book is a little bit of it's a lot of cultural appropriation. But my mother is Bayesian from Barbados and emigrated to England, Lancashire, England, to take her training as a nurse. And at the time, she was very stressed out. She had never been outside of Barbados and had, you know, experienced a lot of racism. And we're talking about the mid 60s, at the time that the social, you know, that the civil rights movement was happening in the Americas and all the things that were going on in the world. And she had come from a completely Black country where you rarely saw any white people to a place where she's one of a few Black people at the time. She said little kids used to come up to her and bite her because their parents had told their kids that she was made of chocolate. Can you believe that? She tells these stories, and I'm just like, really? And so she had purchased this book called Be Young with Yoga by, I think, Robert Hilston, and she had kept it on her travels. So she started using that yoga and meditation way back then to kind of help her make her way through school. And so my parents then emigrated to Canada and emigrated to what was then a tiny town just outside of Toronto. And my mother had no family. My dad went off to work, and this was a tiny little town, no cars, she didn't drive. And so she was super stressed out. And so she had this book that she had pulled out from her travels and had started doing yoga. And I was a precocious 3-year-old. And so I wanted to do yoga with mommy. So when my brother and sister went down to sleep, because she had 3 kids under the age of 4, when she would put them down to sleep, my brother and sister are twins, we would do this yoga together. And this would be our mommy and me time. Like before, you know, now we have mommy and me classes. And all that was not a thing in the 70s. So in 1973, in order for my mother to watch her 30-minute General Hospital soap opera, she would tire me out with this yoga and then give me a lifesaver. Do you remember the lifesaver suckers?
Yeah,
in a butterscotch flavor. Give that to me. Put me on a chair and go, okay, for 30 minutes, we have to be quiet. And that's kind of how she taught me to meditate. She would tell me, count how many times I would lick this lollipop. So that was like how she taught me to meditate. And then we used to flip through this book and just find the poses and do the poses. Like we didn't know anything about the philosophy. She knew that it just made her feel good. And it was something she could share with me. And that was the beginning of my journey. And I kept it with me as a way to manage stress, and all the things that come up in my life that would, you know, make me feel less than. So it was always something I could do on my own. It was always something that I had in my back pocket as a tool. And that was really important for me. And it wasn't until, you know, I got into university that I started using it more often. And from high school to university, I started teaching fitness classes. And I taught a class called Stretch Class. Because at that point in the late 80s and early 90s, people weren't really doing yoga. It wasn't really thing, not like it is now. And it wasn't until about probably 1994 or so when Madonna started doing yoga and wearing the red string around her wrist that I started seeing everybody doing yoga. And then yoga fastly became the mainstream, and we started seeing it added to gym, you know, to the gym class and that kind of thing. And as the population started to age, we started to see modalities of fitness that were less intense, but people really lost that connection to self-reflection, self-study, connection to community and all that. People were just really interested in the power vinyasa and the power asana. And I had always practiced at home in that setting. I'd never really practiced outside of the home setting. And the first time I decided to practice in a yoga studio setting with my son was about 6 weeks old, and I had to get out of the house. My husband's like, you need, you're going to kill all of us. Like, I just needed to get out of the house. And so he said to me, I'm here, go ahead, go do something. And I thought, well, I want to go take a class in a yoga studio, because I hadn't taken a class in a yoga studio. And unbeknownst to me, I showed up to like a lunchtime Ashtanga class, which was not what I had been practicing since I was 3. It was nothing. And then so I show up, and the person at the front desk gives me the once over and looks at me, you know, and says to me, you know, this is going to be hard, right? And I was just like, meanwhile, I have been practicing yoga longer than this person who's signing me in has been alive. Can I just say that? Longer than you've been alive? But okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. I said, that's fine. And I went into class, and I didn't know the primary series for Ashtanga. Like, I just didn't, because I'd been practicing from this book, had my own understanding, had my own research, did my own training at that time. And the teacher was horrible to me. She was absolutely angry that I had showed up. She was saying things like, those of us who don't know the sequence need to start in the beginner class. And how dare you come in here, because the energy you give off in this class. And like, I was behind. I was like one move behind everybody else. And everybody else, it was clear to me, had come together at this time, and this was their regular practice. And it was really cliquey and gross. Like, the whole feeling was just horrible. I was the biggest person in the room. I was the only Black person in the room. And it was clear to me that I was not welcome. It was made very clear to me, don't come back. And so I left and went home, and had that been my only experience of yoga, I probably wouldn't have gone back. However, I had been practicing from this book for a long time, and I had come home and said to my husband, that's it. I'm opening a yoga studio. And he said, wait, what? Because I was an accountant. I had a full-on career. I was on mat leave. And he's like, I was like, yeah, that's it. We're doing it. I'm going to figure it out. And he was like, okay. You know what I mean? I'm in my postpartum brain. He was like, she'll sober up in a minute and she won't want to do this. And I was like, no, I wanted to have a space where I could gently teach people the practice. I could teach the practice as a way for self-care. I could teach the practice as a way to amplify activism. I could teach the practice to people who ordinarily felt marginalized by this practice, people who look like me. So I didn't want anybody else to have this experience of walking into a yoga studio space. I said, if I ever got a chance to have my own studio, I would paint the walls yellow. I would encourage everybody. I would use marketing that reflected the people that I actually saw come to class. I would figure out a way. I would put it in a neighborhood that was, that was accessible to people, that they weren't going to have to travel very far. And I managed to do all those things. And whoever's sending the hearts, I love them. All those hearts on the side. Yeah, love the hearts. Gives me the warm fuzzies. But I said to myself, I'm going to change the game. I'm going to redefine it. And when I first opened my yoga studio, I said, demystifying yoga for the regular person, so that anybody could come in and not feel like, oh, I don't know, I shouldn't be here. Because people already feel like that when you step into those spaces. They already feel like they don't belong, right? And then to have a teacher be really horrible to you is just like, why? The word of yoga literally means unity. And how do you foster unity? By showing up with your bad attitude. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, to that point, Dianne, it's interesting because what year was this that you decided to do this?
2005.
Okay. So what? Almost 15 years ago.
15 years ago.
Well, 15 years ago. We're in 2020.
15 years ago in April. 15 years ago last month.
There you go. But my point is, what you have just described is still happening. And that, to me, is what is so galling, especially as somebody that is Hindu, South Asian, been steeped in the practice. What we see that is yoga is not yoga. And that's something that I really try to spread the knowledge of, because what you have just described, Dianne, are issues that people are still facing. I hear this all the time. I hear this all the time. And this whitewashed, elitist desecration of a spiritual sacred practice is not yoga. You know, and we're seeing that even more now with what is happening in America, with what is happening with Black Lives Matter, and the deafening silence or spiritual bypassing from
100%.
the yoga and community, you know, well, so now I just want us to, I want to go to that, because you've given the audience a really good, you know, blueprint and background. But to me, we have so much to cover, and you have so much truth and wisdom to drop, and I want everybody to hear it from you. So tell me, Dianne, just let's cut to the chase.
Let's get into it. Let's get into it.
You know, I mean, let's not play. We haven't got the time.
Let's get into it.
Tell me how, there's two kind of separate questions here, but the first is how you're doing and what you're thinking right now with what is happening in America.
You know what? I'm first of all, I'm exhausted. I did have to do some self-care today. Second of all, I'm confused. And third of all, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, because true story. Whenever I would get pushback about any messages I would do around yoga and appropriation and bypassing or anything like that, I get a lot of people with a lot of spiritual garbage, I call it, coming at me, you know, telling me things about what I'm saying. And so every now and again, I would turn to my husband and say, time to put up a Black Lives Matter post on my Facebook and call the herd, because that would call the herd. I would get 1,000 people drop me in a minute. 1,000 people would unfollow me in a second. The minute I put up Black Lives Matter, I was out. Today, I opened up my email and I had a message from my local drugstore. And the headline of the message was Black Lives Matter. Like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, that was a bad saying. I couldn't get anybody to say it. Now my in-laws are saying it. Like, I just am in utter shock. My fear is lots of people are bandwagon jumping, that they don't actually know all the nuances or all the history or all the information around that. I think we've been safe at home, sheltered at home, stuck at home, however people feel about self-isolation. And we haven't had the distraction of our everyday lives. We haven't had to go to work. We haven't had to deal with a lot of the distraction. And I think a lot of us are kind of bored. And so now I think, because we're, you know, now that we've seen it happening, it wasn't like we didn't see it happening before. And it wasn't like it wasn't happening with the frequency that it's happening now. Let's be honest. It's been always happening this way for as long as I've been alive anyway. And that's 50 fucking years. This has been going on all that time. But then all of a sudden now everybody's on the bandwagon. Like the tiny little town 15 minutes from me had a Black Lives Matter march yesterday, and I'm like, wait, what? Like a month ago, nobody gave a shit about me. Honest to God. I hear you. Honest to God, nobody. Or I had a big fight with a couple of studios that I had worked for, talking about how they were culturally insensitive, how they weren't, they were threatening to sue me because I called out their cultural insensitivity. And now I'm just like and then people were looking at me sideways, and now all of a sudden everybody's on board. Like, I'm like, wait, what? But what I really need is people to do the work. Right. Like, I don't want this to be performative. This is my new word. I learned it from iRise Yoga. Rebecca Price, shout out to Rebecca Price. Go follow her. I learned from her that term performative activism, where we're worried about our brand, because that's what we see with the NFL, right? The NFL came out, that Rogers guy, and gave a speech that he was clearly reading. Because I was watching his eyes, I was watching where he was looking. I'm like, you don't really mean this. It doesn't feel like it comes from the heart. You don't really mean this. You got caught in a moment, right? And so this performative justice, like, I get that people were horrified by Black people dying. I mean, the big one when I was in university was Rodney King. When Rodney King got beat on the street by 9 police officers. Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure do.
And then we went back to our slumber. That happened for about 5 minutes. He went to court. None of those officers were charged. Woo!
Right. Yeah.
Spoiler alert, that's probably going to happen again, right? And spoiler alert, there's going to be some sort of excuse. If it weren't for the fact that Ahmaud Arbery's life was actually videotaped and people were sharing that tape online, those two white supremacist dudes, one a former police officer and his idiot son, would not be in prison right now. Let's just be honest about
Exactly.
that.
Exactly.
Right? We are seeing what is being filmed and what is being amplified, and we're not seeing all the other little microaggressions we run into every day. Like if I'm in a class and you're playing music that has the N-word in it, that's not cool. Especially if I'm the only Black person in the class. Stop using that music.
Yeah.
You know, stop talking in the vernacular like you're from downtown Detroit, because you're not. Even if you work in that school system, that's not your vernacular. That's not your culture. Don't talk to me like that. Okay? It's, you know what I mean? Like, it's just.
Oh, yes.
All these little microaggressions that people don't want to talk about. Don't use religious icons that belong to other cultures as doorstops in your yoga studio. Don't do it. And if somebody tells you that it hurts their feelings, then take them serious and listen. Don't get your freaking feelings hurt. But I'm just telling you, I've seen it all. People are not paying attention to their own bias.
Right.
And their own understanding of racism. And then when they get called out on it, out come the tears, out come, if you were nice to me, if you liked me, if you would listen to me, I'm so fragile. Can you hold my hand while I walk through this whole experience of learning about racism? Bitch, no. I'm tired. I really am. And I gotta do my own stuff. I gotta keep my own kids alive. I gotta keep my own sanity. And I can't hold your hand, man. You know what? I've written a bunch of articles. There's a bunch of people doing this work. And there's this new thing called Google. Just type those questions in Google, man. Stop trying to kill me out here. I'm like super busy. Trying to keep my kids alive.
Thank you.
From being killed. I'm kind of.
I mean, exactly. And, you know, to that point, Dianne, I think because white people and white women have grown up in a world where they are always the center, right?
Yes.
We have lived as people of color where white women and white men, of course, have been at the center. And so they can't help but center themselves in every conversation. Every time. And you know, I don't know how any Black person is dealing with it right now, because I am exhausted from people sliding into my direct messages, from people trying to center the conversation around themselves. And this, quite frankly, I have to be honest with you, Dianne, is coming not just from white people, but from non-Black people of color as well.
Agreed.
And I have to call that out as a non-Black person of color. This is not about us. When we talk about amplifying melanated voices, I am melanated. It is not about amplifying my own voice now. It is about amplifying the voices of my Black sisters in yoga. That is what we should be doing. I mean, across the board, but certainly in yoga and wellness. And so it got some of the things that I have seen this week have galled me. And if I have one more white person tell me that they believe in calling people in, I'm not going to be able to contain myself anymore. You know, honestly.
You know what? I'm over calling people in. I'm all about calling people out, okay? Calling you out of your comfort, calling you out of your name. Like, seriously, you could honestly give two shits about me a month ago. And
Thank you.
And to honestly threaten to sue me because I called you out on your cultural appropriation. I called you out when a person told you you were doing the wrong thing. I called you out on all those things, and you threaten to sue me or tell me I can't talk about race in your space ever again. You're the one who brought it in here, talking about racism. What was it she said to me? Talking about racism is racist. If you knew me, I'm a good person. Like, I put up with all of that stuff my entire life, and I snapped and lost my shit. Like, I just snapped and went, you know that whole saying, what's the saying? The straw that broke the camel's back?
Yeah, the straw that broke the camel's
whatever that saying is, whatever that old adage is. I don't know if we're supposed to be saying it anymore. I apologize if I offended anyone. But I hit a tipping point where I'm like, how much more of this am I expected to tolerate? And how long am I expected to close my mouth and not be the angry Black woman when I am angry that I have to put up with this stuff? all the time. And when I call you out or call you in or call you up, you always have a problem and you can't deal with it. And I bet you now, I don't follow any of these people anymore. I bet you they're putting Black Lives Matter all over their stuff now too, when they don't believe it. I would just prefer you said nothing.
Right. I agree.
Prefer
100.
You stepped out of the conversation
100.
because you're problematic.
Thank you.
You're problematic.
What I'm seeing as well, and also I'm really confused.
Yeah.
After George Floyd was tortured and murdered, let us not forget that poor man was tortured before he was murdered.
And told to relax. When he said he couldn't breathe, that guy told him to relax.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to relax with my knee on your neck? He honestly said to him, relax. Watch the video.
And then we have also, I'm really confused when we see white people in yoga and wellness posting pictures of themselves and talking about George Floyd. What has that got to do with George Floyd?
Nothing.
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 And I've seen George Floyd and then an All Lives, which actually enraged me. Yeah.
Oh, no.
And this is the point. This is the point. Please do the work.
Yeah.
You know, for those of us that have, especially of color, but, you know, as those of us that have been doing the work, and this is obviously, there are some wonderful white allies out there that have also been doing the work. I've got to give a shout out to Melanie Klein on this call today. Melanie, thank you. Because you are what allyship looks like. Jeevana Heyman, thank you. Liz Getman, thank you.
Yes.
Because
I know all these people.
I know, right? That's what allyship looks like. And if you don't know, follow these people.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
But
I'd also like to shout out my
Dianne,
friend Jackie, Study Bee Yoga. From Jackie Barbie. That's what an ally looks like. She's my girl.
Right, and that's the point. So we know that there are white people that do understand what allyship looks like.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about how this makes you feel. Like you've mentioned the 2 yoga studios tried to sue you, which is just ridiculous.
They said they were going to. I don't think they didn't have a case. Right.
Of course they didn't have a case. But isn't it interesting? This is what they do, Dianne.
Yeah, to silence
this is what they
100%.
do.
To silence me. And I'm sure if they're watching it now, they're going to
scare you and to silence you. Yeah. So talk to me about how are you dealing with this implosion in yoga and wellness that, you know, is long overdue, but you, I think, shared, which I loved today, wasn't it? The white person in the outfit with the selfie and the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. They're trying to show her boobs too, like really trying to sexualize.
And I love the thigh, the slit, and the posing and the performative, that performative activism and allyship that we know is nonsensical.
Because it's trendy.
And how does that make you feel as not only just a Black woman, but a Black woman in yoga and wellness that's been fighting the fight for decades?
It makes me sad and disappointed that everything becomes an Instagram moment, that everything is performative. And I shared that post from a friend of mine and another great ally, Colin Yogan. He's a professor or a teacher at the University of Saskatchewan, or is it Saskatoon? And he's a Canadian as well. And he is always, you know, he's got a degree in religion, kinesiology, and psychology. Like he's like this brilliant dude. Another great white ally. Him and his wife are also on Yoga International with me as well. And he posted that initially with the full commentary on everything that was wrong with that and calling people out.
Right.
I'm tired of the word in. Calling people out to do their work. I feel like that calling people in is that whole tone policing.
Oh my, beyond!
Right?
I
think that's tone policing. I'm calling you out. I'm calling you onto the, when I was a kid, we used to call it calling people onto the carpet. When you got called onto the carpet, you best come prepared because you're about to have your ass handed to you. Yeah. Right? So he wrote that post and I felt sick to my stomach and I felt this sinking feeling in my heart because to me, it means that they don't really understand and they're not really dedicated and they're cashing in on a moment. Right. And this moment has been 401 years in the making. Just to be 100% clear, I am not African-American. We'd already established I live in Canada. I was born and raised here. My parents are from Barbados. My lived experience of racism here in Canada is different than the lived experience of racism in the United States. But where we intersect is at the moment of oppression. So anybody who lives in a country that has been settled by white folks or colonized by Europe has a shared experience of racism, right? We may not have had mass enslavement like they had in the United States, but we did also have slavery here. We not have had en masse segregation, but we also had segregation here. Very recently, they put a woman who I'm having a brain fart because I'm so fired up, on the $10 bill, who only recently was acquitted of being in a white space at a movie theater. She was a black business owner back in segregation, and she had enough money to sit in the expensive seats. And she decided she wasn't going to sit in the gallery. She was going to sit in the expensive seats. Just so you know, peanut gallery is a racist term. She wanted to sit up front, and she was arrested. And they only recently acquitted her, like maybe 20 years ago. And her sister was on hand to accept her image on the $10 bill. So we have our own history and our own work to do here. So I wanted to be clear that that type of institutionalized racism is rampant everywhere. Anti-Black sentiment happens in all cultures. There's Asian people who have an issue with Black people. There's South Asian people who have an issue with Black people. There's Arab people who have an issue with Black people. There's white. I just would like to know, collectively, as a ethnicity, what we did. So many people dislike us. I just want to know. Like, last I knew, my ancestors were minding their own business on the continent, doing whatever we were doing. I don't have the history lesson to know what my people were doing before they were snatched from their homes, dumped on ships, and either shipped to the West Indies, which my parents were, or my family was, or shipped to the southern United States. And just so we're clear, we're interwoven in that, because it wasn't like the slave traders were like, oh, are you a family? Oh, do you all want to go to Barbados? Great, let's all keep you together. You know, that wasn't happening. We were ripping families apart, and we were sending them all over the world to build the empire that the UK is today, to build the empire that the United States, Turtle Island, and North America is today. It was built on our backs. Yes. And yet we're the most hated ethnicity ever. I just don't get it. I want somebody to explain to me why every single culture has an issue with us. Anti-Black sentiment, and there's even anti-Black sentiment within the continent. Like, why? Why? Are you sorry. The phone was like, I hear you, girl. I gotta
I know. The phone was like, preach it.
Yeah, preach. Let me lay down. Let me justify. So I just want to, again, I just want to know why. Like, why that is such a thing. I just want to know. I want somebody to explain to me why anti-sentiment, Black anti-sentiment is okay and so revered, and we've done something. I would like to know, because all of these civilizations would not be around at the extent that they were around if it weren't for us.
Absolutely. And there's no doubt about that. And, you know, being South Asian, I can speak that, of course, there's a hell of a lot of anti-Black sentiment in the South Asian community. But I have to say now I was always fighting that anti-Blackness within the South Asian culture itself. And to me, listen, let me just be very clear. If everybody that you know, whatever ethnicity you are, looks like you, there's a problem.
Right.
Because it's within these insular communities that we create that racism and anti-Blackness thrive consciously, unconsciously, subconsciously. So it is upon you as an individual, especially for those of us in yoga and wellness, to get out of your circle. And not tokenistically go and try and latch onto your one Black friend, or, you know, one person of color that you're then always referring to. You know? Oh, well, you know, my friend's Asian or South Asian or Black or whatever it is. It is upon you to do that, because that is how you're also going to listen and learn. And right now we have to listen and learn from you as Black people. So now I want to ask you something that, I mean, has really been bothering me.
Yes, let's dive in.
I have seen, Dianne, in the past week, people in yoga and wellness suddenly become anti-racism educated.
I was just talking about that today.
Right? And Janessa and I were actually talking about this yesterday as well. And I just can't. I can't. So over to you. Tell us what you think about that.
I think this is cashing in and bandwagon jumping and trend jumping. Like, I don't know, you know, I'm always talking about white folks do their own work and white folks educate other white folks, but I don't understand why all of a sudden you have elevated yourself to expert in my lived experience. I'm just curious. I don't know why that is. I have to believe that it's another function of white supremacy and another function of capitalism. Now that everybody's a hot topic, because you know that Michelle Johnson, who's running a teacher training, you know that sold out 3 times in a row now, right? Like she has had an influx of people buying into that training. And I'm curious to know how many people will take that training and then put together their own training and try peddling this all over the place. I have been doing this work where I've been traveling to yoga studios and talking about this work for a decade. And prior to me, before that was a thing where you went and did workshops all over the place 10 years ago, I was writing about it, right? I was blogging about it. I was teaching it. From my very first yoga teacher training that I ran in 2009, I spoke to that implicitly, right? That we are never going to reach a place of enlightenment as a collective society until we start addressing racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, all the isms. And I've been talking like this for 20 years. And then all of a sudden, there's all these people with very little knowledge who haven't even examined their own privilege, who always sit in a position of privilege, who now think they're going to cash in on the next big thing. And that's what I think. I think there's some people out there who I trust to do it, and who I believe can do a good job of it. And then there's always those people who jump on a trend. It's very much that post of performative activism. It's very much that thing, right? Some of them are well-meaning, but some of them are looking at the bottom line. Because like I said, for me to get an email from my local drugstore with the headline, Black Lives Matter, if I had said that in the drugstore a month ago, you probably would have escorted me out as
I'm sure.
There's like all of a sudden that's an okay thing to put on everything. They painted it in Columbus Square in Washington, D.C. Like, really, I'm at a loss because, like I said, I used to cull the herd of my Instagram by just putting up one of those posts and just watching people flee. And I have a lot of people around me who are white yoga teachers who are posting that on their feed, and people are also unfollowing them.
Right. Yeah. But it's also interesting because everybody was going crazy over the Black Lives Matter banner in DC. I just found it odd. You know, in some way, it's that kind of, you know, okay, and then what? You know what I mean? Like, how is this, what does this mean? How is this helping them? You know, and I think for me personally, there's a lot of what I'm seeing unfold and people jumping on these bandwagons that are not helpful. No. You know, and second of all, and I have to keep stressing this, and I said this at the beginning of the call and I'm going to say it again, this is the time to amplify Black voices, not melanated voices. And I have a big problem with that because I'd like to ask you your opinion now on non-Black people of color that were never doing anti-racism work, that are suddenly now also jumping on the bandwagon of becoming the self-proclaimed anti-racism educator. Talk to me about that.
I find that when people don't know what to do or want to be centered in the conversation, they create their own brand of something instead of just elevating the people who have already been doing the work. And this was a conversation I've been having in my trainings forever. People are always like, what should I do? You do not need to start your own organization and start pulling from everybody else's work. If you want to do this, go and, you know, we can do this as a collective. We are much stronger together than we are with all these little fractured little all over implicitly, right? That we are never going to reach a place of enlightenment as a collective society until we start addressing racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, all the isms. And I've been talking like this for 20 years. And then all of a sudden, there's all these people with very little knowledge who haven't even examined their own privilege, who always sit in a position of privilege, who now think they're going to cash in on the next big thing. And that's what I think. I think there's some people out there who I trust to do it, and who I believe can do a good job of it. And then there's always those people who jump on a trend. It's very much that post of performative activism. It's very much that thing, right? Some of them are well-meaning, but some of them are looking at the bottom line. Because like I said, for me to get an email from my local drugstore with the headline, Black Lives Matter, if I had said that in the drugstore a month ago, you probably would have escorted me out as
I'm sure.
terrorist,
There's no
right?
There's
like all of a sudden that's an okay thing to put on everything. They painted it in what? Columbus Square in Washington, D.C. Like, really, I'm at a loss because, like I said, I used to cull the herd of my Instagram by just putting up one of those posts and just watching people fled or flee. And I have a lot of people around me who are white yoga teachers who are posting that on their feed, and people are also unfollowing them.
Right. Yeah. But it's also interesting because everybody was going crazy over the Black Lives Matter banner in DC. I just found it odd, you know, in some way. It's that kind of, you know, okay, and then what? You know
Exactly.
what I mean? Like, how is this, what does this mean? How is this helping them? You know, and I think for me personally, there's a lot of what I'm seeing unfold and people jumping on these bandwagons that are not helpful.
No.
You know, and second of all, and I have to keep stressing this, and I said this at the beginning of the call, and I'm going to say it again, this is the time to amplify Black voices, not melanated voices. And I have to, I have a big problem with that, because I'd like to ask you your opinion now on non-Black people of color that were never doing anti-racism work, that are suddenly now also jumping on the bandwagon of becoming the self-proclaimed anti-racism educator. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I find that when people don't know what to do or want to be centered in the conversation, they create their own brand of something instead of just elevating the people who have already been doing the work. And this is a conversation I've been having in my trainings forever. People are always like, what should I do? You do not need to start your own organization and start pulling from everybody else's work. If you want to do this, go and, you know, we can do this as a collective. We are much stronger together than we are with all these little fractured little pieces all over the place, where you now start to come competing with each other. I want to know, for these people who are maybe non-white people doing this work around this, what's your investment? Why are you doing this, and why now? So you have been discriminated against for your skin color just like us forever, and you weren't actually doing anything. And if anything, you would elevate yourself over Black people. Well, I'm not Black. Right?
Yes.
I actually, at the beginning of the week when I started posting about this, I had somebody who claimed to be South Asian write a comment talking to me about Black supremacy, that if you feed into this Black Lives Matter, you're actually elevating Black supremacy. And they tagged, it's still, I didn't delete the comment because I thought it was so weird. They tagged Donald Trump, they tagged Interpol, they tagged all this weird stuff. And they were like, what about my life, brown life? Stop saying Black Lives Matter, brown lives matter. And I was just like, this is how they divide and conquer. This is a function of white supremacy. Are you going to let the Black people take over? What about the brown people? What about the Asian people? Yeah, everybody's life is important and everybody's life matters. But brown people and Asian people, are you seeing your people die in the streets under the knee of a cop?
We are not.
I haven't seen it. Maybe you'll enlighten me.
No. Let's cut the bullshit.
I'm pretty sure every 10 minutes a Black person dies at the hand of the police. I'm pretty sure. Why not?
Are you there? Yeah. Dianne, you kind of froze there. But
yes.
To that point.
I have to plug my phone in.
Oh, that's why to me, it is not about amplifying melanated voices. It is about amplifying the voices of Black people around the world, you know, specifically in 100%. America, but obviously around the world that have suffered from institutionalized racism. We see this in the United Kingdom where I'm from. It's the same, you know, institutionalized racism, systemic oppression, implicit bias, all of those things. And to me, you're absolutely right. It is not, you know, and I've seen the same conversations like you were saying about brown lives coming from Latinx people as well.
Yeah.
But yet, to me, listen, this isn't about any of us right now. This is about Black people in America specifically, but also other countries where they have experience, like the United Kingdom, like what you were saying in Canada, institutionalized oppression, implicit bias, you know, systemic racism, all of those things. This is about that, because none of us are being harassed, certainly not South Asians, you know, by the police that I have ever seen.
Yeah.
So and
not to
maybe
the degree.
in the UK, I know that after there was that whole anti-Islamophobia, that there was harassment by the police of young brown boys in the UK. But that's not what we're talking about right now, because there are other systems of oppression. It is beyond police harassment and police brutality. And I think people are getting really confused with the conversation here. And it's not about, Dianne, to me, casual racism either.
No.
You know, I've experienced plenty of casual racism.
Oh, yeah.
I have not experienced systemic oppression and institutionalized racism. Does that make sense?
100%.
And there is a huge difference.
There's a huge difference.
There is a huge difference.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference.
There is.
And we need to have these conversations, but amplify your voice. So tell me, how does it feel for you to have, you know, non-Black people of color start talking nonsense, basically?
You know what? I don't engage people who are talking nonsense because I can't change their mind. Do you know what I mean? Like, my energy is wasted trying to change their mind. Right. So you know what I say? Exit stage left. I give you permission to disengage from me, unfollow, and go do your own work. If you want to educate people on what's going on in Brown Lives Matter, go ahead and open up, you know, go ahead and grab a platform. That's what I did. Create your own platform, create your own following, go ahead and do your own education. Don't come on my platform and do it. Go and do it on your own platform. Right now, I am trying to keep my sons alive. Right now, I'm trying for my sons not to have the conversation that my parents had with me, and my parents didn't have that conversation with them. My parents didn't have the same conversation because they grew up in Barbados. So it was a very different thing. I would like the conversation to end with my children about how they have to behave in front of the police, about what happens when somebody, and I'm going to say the word because people need to hear it and hear it the way I hear it, when somebody at their school calls them a nigger. I need to prepare them for that, and I would like to not have to. So that's what I'm working on, that this ends in this time, that this is the last time that we have to do this, because we folks are tired. So I get that you have experienced racism. I get that you understand oppression, but until you see somebody that looks like your mother or your sister or your brother or your dad laying on the ground regularly, being killed by the police, then we can have a conversation. There isn't a day that I go by that Facebook or Instagram doesn't allow or does allow an image that is so traumatic to me to be in my feed. Perfect example. Somebody posted a picture of a uterus. Somebody had had a hysterectomy and had a picture of a uterus that fit in the palm of the hand of the surgeon. And that blew my mind because that holds a whole baby. My kids were like 7 pounds, 8 pounds, and that uterus not only holds that baby, but pushes it out. And I thought that was amazing, and I put it on my feed. Instagram took it down and called it a violent image. In the next scroll, I'm watching Ahmaud Arbery get killed on Instagram or Facebook, and that's not a violent image. That's an image that gets to be in my feed. I can't show you a picture of a surgeon holding a uterus, but I get to see people that look like me on the regular get murdered. I am so triggered by it now that I have to scroll through really fast. And then here's the thing. My kids are on these platforms watching people that look like their uncle, their grandpa, their friends, getting killed on the regular, and they're 13 and 15, and then coming and wanting to talk to me about it. Until that's happening in your community, can you just do me a favor and help us out? And once we get this problem solved, I'm willing to bet it's going to solve problems across the board. I'm willing to bet that if we can come together in this moment, that you also will benefit from the fact that I'm not experiencing this kind of discrimination. I think it will change everything. But right now, I need you to help me out by supporting this movement and looking at your own bias and looking at your own racism, looking at your own conditioning. Was it learned by your parents? Did you have a bad experience with somebody? Is it the television? Is it the politics? Like, I need you to figure out what it is and get over it, because we need to move on. This is not working. Hasn't been working for 401 years. And we as Black folks are tired as F, man. Tired AF. Why do every 30 years we have to relive this? And it's not until we come to truth and reconciliation about how this has been going on for an entire existence on Turtle Island are we ever going to get past it. People just have to own their shit. And I don't want you to feel guilty about it. And I'm not blaming you for what your ancestors did, but I'm asking you to look how you benefited and continue to benefit from what your ancestors did and change it. In yoga, we call it action. And what is action? Karma. This is your karma, your action, your dharma, your noble purpose to make a change and take a stand. Especially if you're in the wellness community, especially if you're a yoga teacher, your job is to help shift and shape consciousness, and it starts with your own.
I mean, we just need to tape record that, Dianne, and send that around because, you know, I don't know how you're doing it. I've said that to so many of my Black sisters this week because I am exhausted. I'm arguing with people. I'm trying to educate people. And that is white and non-Black people of color, just FYI. To me, it's coming from everywhere. And, you know, like you said, nobody is blaming white people for being white.
No.
I've never heard anybody do that. That just makes absolutely no sense to me. But it is, listen, you were born in this life into this body, like I was, South Asian, you're Black, they're white, brown, whatever, Asian. What are we going to do with our power and our privilege in this life? And quite frankly, for me, there is no neutral. I don't want to hear ifs and buts about Black Lives Matter. There are no ifs and buts. And, you know, talk to me about this. I am tired of people telling me this is a political issue. This is not a political issue. This is a human rights issue.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
I don't know. You know what? I've used the statement in the body positive movement that the minute you take a breath or the minute you show up in the world, however you show up, the body becomes political. And it's a phrase that I've borrowed or I've heard. I can't remember where I've heard it. I'm sure if anybody knows where that quote is from, feel free to share it in the post here, that the body is political and that I always teach that politics runs everything, right? Like if you don't participate in the political process, we end up with a president that we have, right? It's the people who did not vote that elected this man to the highest office, right? So everything has a political outcome. However, when you see people unfairly being treated for their entire existence on the planet, that's about humanity. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. It doesn't matter who's running parliament in Canada or in the UK or anywhere else. What matters is how human beings are treating each other. And that is not a political issue. What it is if we're running around, especially as wellness practitioners, going, namaste, namaste. The light in me sees love, bows down to the light in you. And yet you are not willing to say Black Lives Matter when you see somebody die in the street. When you see Ahmaud Arbery get shot and nobody get arrested until a video goes around. And then he gets arrested and the district attorney has to recuse themselves because they've already seen the video and they didn't see anything wrong with it. Or when the social media marketing department of the NFL has to go behind the managers and the owners of the NFL, call the players, make a video through the players talking about this professional athlete is Ahmaud Arbery. This professional athlete is Michael Brown. This professional athlete is Tamar Rice. This, and has to do that behind the back of the NFL, show that video, let it go viral for them to even admit that they were wrong. This is a human issue. This has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with money. Because when whatever his name came off and gave this bullshit, I'm listening, I'm here, that his PR department put together, then you know what you can do? You can hire back Colin Kaepernick and you can admit you blackballed him out of the job. Because all he was ever doing was taking a knee so that George Floyd didn't have to die, and everybody had a problem with it. They should be standing for the national anthem. Read the second verse of the national anthem. Read the second verse. It talks about us, Black people, not being human, and we're supposed to stand for that?
Right.
Because it's fake patriotism. You know what true patriotism is? Standing up for each other. Giving a shit about each other. That's humanity. Don't hide behind the flag. It's a flag. Here in Canada, we are not connected to the flag like y'all in America. We don't go on and on. Stand up, sit down, do whatever. We don't care. It's a flag.
It's the same in the UK. It's the same in the UK. This love of the flag is the most bizarre thing. Not being American, living in America for 9.5 years, it's frightening what the flag has come to represent. And to me, when I hear from people, it's political, it's tone policing. Totally. Because that's how they tell you not to, we don't have politics here. Oh, you know, we're neutral, blah, 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 blah. And to me, this isn't about, yes, like you said, everything in some instances has to do with politics. To me, this transcends politics.
Yes.
It is human rights. This is yoga. This is humanity.
Yes. And if you're going to say namaste, the light in me sees the light in you, then you can see my light. How do I even know?
How many people in yoga and wellness have we heard saying, I'm sending love and light? Holding a crystal and sending love and light isn't helping anybody.
No.
Right? Period.
No. And putting up these generic statements on your website, here at Fill in the Blank Yoga Studio, we honor all lives and believe that every life should be protected. And we're here to help people, you know, find their light and then love and light. Like when they make those bullshit statements that don't say anything because they're too afraid to say Black Lives Matter because they're worried that half of the people that practice yoga, do you see that? Practice yoga in their studio space are going to have a problem with Black Lives Matter. If you're a yoga person and you have a problem with the word Black Lives Matter, I have a problem with you. It's not Black Lives Matter more. It's not only Black Lives Matter. It's Black Lives Matter too. Like,
right.
Crying out loud.
Please. Yeah. You know, and really? I mean, it's true. I left my yoga studio in San Clemente because they clearly illustrated who they are. Yeah. And silence is compliance. 100%. However, which way you, and this was pre the race riots. This was during COVID, and I mean that's a whole nother story. But the point is, silence is compliance, and we see you, and you know what? I don't need you to do performative allyship now, because we have seen where you stand. Okay, we have seen where you stand. Yes. Right. We know that the teacher affiliated with your studio led the counter protest that I was at last week for All Lives Matter. Just don't. Right. So to me, we are seeing big issues. Yes. And what are we going to do? So now I want you to tell us, Dianne, as a Black woman in yoga and wellness, what you would like to see from non-Black people of color and white allies and just white folks in the industry.
I would like them to do their own work of self-study. I would like them to sit down and do their own work. It's called Swadhyaya in yoga. I would like you to look at what you truly believe before you get up here with your crystal and your bullshit and tell me something out of one side of your mouth and then something out of the other side of your neck. There are tons of people in the yoga industry that are biased, that are complicit. I have actually had the yoga studios here in my town. I just scrolled through a lot of their Facebook pages and their Instagram pages, and there is dead silence. One of the former major yoga studio owners here put up a candle on her page and was like, I'm bowing out of social media for right now. I'm sure you can find what you need on social media, but I'm just really stressed out. And that's the tone I heard when I wrote her post. Yeah. And I'm just like, how lucky for you.
Yeah. How fortunate for you.
Yeah. Exit stage left. Well, my kids are at a protest, and I'm just hoping it doesn't go violent. We're concerned that it's not going to, and my son loses his life. Do you know what I mean? He's already being picked on at school. He's already being disciplined by teachers who are quick to discipline him before they discipline his white peers who are doing the exact same thing. You know, I'm just really over all of it. So what I need people to do is stop asking Black people what to do. Stop it, especially Black women, because they always ask us. Yeah. We are always in the forefront of everything. Right. Yeah. And do your own research. There's this awesome thing called Google and the internet. And if you just type right into the chat box or into that, it's called a search bar. If you just type into the search bar, How am I a good ally? How can I do self-study? How do I show up for others? How do I not center myself in the conversation? Use whatever language you like. And there's a lot of great allies right here on Instagram and Facebook that have all these tools. We've been here for the past 10 years as Black people, for the past 50 years as Black people, for the past 100 years as Black people, since the beginning of time, creating toolboxes for people and putting them up online and writing books and all those things. And all you need to do is do your own research. As always, you expect Black people to do it for you. Well, we tired, right? We are just trying to live our lives, and we do not have time for you to go, what should I do? I feel so bad. Please tell me I'm a good white person because I didn't say the N word with a hard A or a hard R or whatever the fuck it is we're saying these days. Okay? I need you to do your own work. I just need you to do that. And stop asking Black people to do it for you. We've already done it all for you, actually. You just have to look it up online. There's lots of people teaching all kinds of things. Go to Black people who are teaching this and have been teaching this. Cornell West has been writing about this his whole academic career. I think the Obama Foundation has put out a bunch of stuff. You can go to, there's tons of people online doing this work and have resources all over the place. It's just all you got to do is find the resource. That's all you got to do. That's exactly, Liz. The tools are already there.
Yeah. But you know what? We're going to get cut off, but we have to go back on because we haven't even had time for questions.
Absolutely.
Right? It's just,
We'll just go back on again.
We're just going to go back on.
But hang out. We're coming back.
Yeah, exactly. If it gets cut off, join us because this conversation is going nowhere. I mean, we're going to continue. It's going everywhere. Yeah. But I also have to say, to me, it's about paying Black women.
Oh, yeah.
Don't be sliding into Black women's DMs and asking for free advice. You know, there are plenty of people like yourself. Buy your book. Go to your YouTube channel. Yeah. Go on your courses. You know, you're teaching as part of the Yoga International platform. Ultimately, let us pay Black women for the work that they have been doing for decades.
Yes.
This is Dianne's book. Everybody that is on this call, I want you to go and order it. It's available. I think, wasn't it #1, Dianne?
Yes, the Kindle version was #1. The Kindle version is like $2. I personally like a hard copy book. I like a how-to manual and a hard copy book, but the Kindle version is like $2. Yeah, and you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at your independent bookseller. It's everywhere fine books are sold. Damn, you probably could get it at Costco. It's like everywhere. It's published by Penguin Random House. I think that's like the largest, if not second largest.
It is. That is the largest publisher in the world. Yeah.
So you can find it anywhere. You can find it anywhere. So yeah, thank you for ever told me to plug my book. I'm plugging it. And I have another book coming out, Yoga Where You Are, and that's happening in December. You can go on my website. You can practice with me at yogaforeveryone.tv. I have an online yoga studio. I've had an online yoga studio since 2012. I have been in the game for a long time. And it's just now that people are like, oh, wait, what? There's racism and wellness spaces and yoga? What do you mean? I've never seen it. Stop it.